Welcome back for episode number 169 of the weekly playback. So, since the consensus seemed to be that I should separate out my board game segments into separate videos, like how to play and review videos, that's what I'm going to do starting today. The consensus, or the majority from the few who did comment on it, rather, there were not like a ton of people who commented, but from the few who did comment, that seems to be the majority opinion, so that's what we're going to do. So starting with this week's video, I'll have just a small segment in this week's video mentioning which videos you can expect to see for whatever games, and then I might just mention what other games I played for which I will not be creating those videos because either I've already talked about them before or whatever reason. So that's how we'll do that going forward. I do expect this to be a longer video because the rant of the week is going to be longer because I have a comment from Alex of Board Game Co. to respond to. So if you look at last week's video, he left a comment on that video and I responded to some of the things he said, but not all of the things, but I do think it's deserving of me responding to it in a video and talking about it. So that's what I'm going to do this week. And that's going to be, take up quite a bit of time actually. And then of course there's going to be a lot of discussion about Iran and the hypocrisy of the board game industry surrounding that. So anyway, let's just get started. So in the last week, I didn't get to play as many games as I hoped. The games that I played, which you might be able to see the videos for if you want to, are Cozy Stickerville. I've only played 1 year of that, which I really enjoyed, and Pillars of Fate from Ivy Studio, which is a 2-player game. And I also played like 4 games, maybe 3 or 4 games of Trinket Trove. So that was fun as well. Really enjoyed Trinket Trove, and I think it might be coming out with an expansion from what I saw. Not 100% sure on that. So those are the games that I played in the last week, and if you want to see how to play videos of Pillars of Fate or Cozy Stickerville, you can go check those out on my channel. So let's move on. So for games that I am backing, I am actually backing something. So I decided, because I don't necessarily always get review copies from Allplay. So Asmodee, which I do receive review copies from, sometimes does get Allplay games as well to give out review copies of, but I so far haven't gotten anything from them that I'm aware of. And Allplay recently came out with a campaign that had some stuff on it that I was really interested in, so I was like, you know what, I'll just back it. So I do need to sell a lot of games though. I really want to sell games to kind of just make some money and get some of my money back. But the game that I am backing, so I'm backing the all-in pledge of the Goats Legacy game. So what's it called actually? Mountain Goats Legacy. So it's the Goats game, Mountain Goats game, but turned into a legacy version. And I think that this would be a really fun game to play with my Monday night group, who I think would enjoy this because my Monday night group isn't into like heavier games. They're into more lighter games and stuff like that. So I think that this would be really fun to play with them. So I thought, yeah, why not get a legacy game? Like I've actually really not played many legacy games. Like now I've started Cozy Stickerville on my own as a solo game, which is a legacy game, so I'm really looking forward to finishing that. I think I played like 1 or 2 sessions of like a pandemic legacy a long time ago when I had received a copy of that and was paid to do an overview video of that. So I think I did like 1 or 2 years or whatever you call them of that game, but I never finished it. So Mountain Goats Legacy looks really adorable. I enjoy the standalone Mountain Goats game, so I was like, yeah, I think I'll back this. And then the campaign includes a solo game, which looks so good. I mean, I'm just like, the gameplay and the artwork just looks amazing. So I really wanted that. It's called Enchanted Ivy. So it's a solo game. And then if you back the all-in, you also get a free tiny Mountain Goats game. And the art is done by, who does the art? Seppi. I'm going to butcher the name. Is it Seppi Beppu or Beppu Seppi or something like that? God, who is the artist? I think I have to scroll down further to see the artist name, but it's something I think I have their name. Oh, Sai Beppu. I think that's it. I just see it on a box over there for Ghost Lift. I believe that they're the artist who did the art for Ghost Lift as well. So I believe that that's the artist. I can scroll down all the way and find it, but I think that that's the artist. So yeah, the little mountain goats, the tiny mountain goats game looks so cute. Like the artwork is just so freaking adorable. So I was like, okay, I really want that too. Oh yeah, here we go. Tiny mountain goats. Why can't I find the artist name right away? I can't find the artist name right away, but I'm pretty sure. Oh yeah, it is Saibapu. Yes, it's Saibapu, and it just looks so freaking cute. Like maybe I'll just hold up my iPad and show you guys. Look at that. Like that is so freaking cute. So I really wanted that. So I'm backing in the all-in version to get Mountain Goats Legacy plus Enchanted Ivy and the tiny mountain goats, which is adorable. Yeah, so, and the artwork for Enchanted Ivy is really nice. And it also comes with like if you back the all in, you also get like the medallion token, which you can turn in for a tiny game apparently. And I know when I backed another Kickstarter of theirs, I received one of those medallion tokens, and I still haven't turned it in, and now I need to find it. I'm like, oh crap, I already have one of those, I think, which I've never turned in, and now I wish I could find it. So I'm gonna check the inside of the game box for River Valley Glassworks. I think that that's the game that I got it with, and see if it's in there, and if it is, yay. Otherwise, I have no idea where it is. So that's what I'm backing right now. I considered backing Arborea, not the expansion, but maybe like the standalone tile placement game. But then I'm not sure if you back that, whether you get the replacement cubes and insert corrections for the base game if you already own the base game. In the end, I think I'm probably not going to back anything, to be honest, from the Arborea campaign, because honestly, since getting my Arborea, my copy of Arborea, I still haven't played it. I would like to, but I haven't gotten around to being able to play it again since I covered it for its Kickstarter a very long time ago. So yeah, so not backing that, and I'm not backing anything else at the moment. So in terms of new arrivals, I only received 2 new games recently, and that is Cozy Stickerville. So you can head on over to the video to learn how to play this and maybe see some of the components. But this is a really fun legacy game that I've only played 1 year so far, but I'm really enjoying it so far, and I'm looking forward to completing all the other years, trying to pace myself and not finish it all in one day, because I feel like I actually could do that since I'm playing it solo. And then another game from Asmodee, which I did not request. So I did request Cozy Stickerville, but this one I didn't request, but they sent it along anyway, is Carnuta. And I had played a 3-player game of this at PAX Unplugged. And the reason I haven't yet created a how to play video of this is because I want to play it again before I do that, just to refresh my memory. Now, I'm not sure that it really needs it, but it has a slipcover. And the reason it has a slipcover is because the inside cover is just all artwork, which is pretty nice in itself, actually. So let me just show you the inside and show you the components it comes with. So it comes with 4 different player boards, and you're going to have something that you're going to put inside here as your like tracker for those things. And then this is what the box looks like. So nice box, and then this lifts up and you'll have other stuff in there. So I use my own plastic baggies for some of the cardboard stuff that you'll be punching out. And those are the clear plastic tracker things that you'll have in your player boards. It includes a score pad. And then it includes this really nice, I don't know if they're acrylic or plastic. I think that they're just plastic. I think that's just plastic. These double-sided like tablets, and these are really nice. So it includes a bunch of those. So depending on player count, you'll be using a certain number of those. And then the cards. I do feel like the material will make it a little bit hard to shuffle, but this is one side of the cards. So you have daytime cards and like nighttime cards. And then the other side of the card will show like a certain kind of ingredient. So yeah, I want to play this once more at least before I do a how to play video on this, because it's been a while. PAX Unplugged was quite some time ago and I don't remember too well how to play. So I would like to play it again before I create a video for this game. So this arrived recently as well. So looking forward to playing this again as well. I'm not sure if I can remember what game people have compared this to. I'm not sure if I'm just making this up or not, but I think I heard something about it being compared to Splendor, or I might just be making that up. I don't know. But yeah, so these are the two games that I have received recently. So let's move on. So this is not a game, but I wanted to talk about it. So I saw a post that Board Game Therapist made on Instagram where he recommended this book. It's called The Anti-Planner, How to Get Shit Done When You Don't Feel Like It. And it just looked really good. It's a little bit pricey. I can't remember. I think it was like close to $50, but it's not a planner. It's not like something that you're going to like schedule, oh, I need to do this on this day. But if you have a procrastination problem, which I do, I've been a severe procrastinator for like the vast majority of my life. It started in college and undergrad and then just continued onwards for the rest of my life. I was extremely productive and not a procrastinator in high school. Like I was an overachieving student in high school and at the top of my class in certain classes, like in math, I was at the top of my class, in sciences, I was at the top of my class, and so on. So I was like an overachieving student in high school, but then in college, I just started procrastinating like on things like to no end. Like, you know, I would wait until the night before to write like 20-page papers. And I think that the reason I got away with procrastinating and it stuck with me for the rest of my life is because I would get A's on those papers. Like I'd be absolutely miserable while writing them, and then I would always swear to myself that I'm never going to do that again, that I'm never going to wait until the night before to write another paper, but I always did. And I even did that in law school. Even in law school, I waited until the night before to write like 30, 40-page papers, and again would be absolutely miserable doing that. And I don't know why I would torture myself like that, but again, it kind of was like reinforcing this bad behavior when I would get an A on the paper that I was so miserable writing. But I hate that I procrastinate, and I still procrastinate. So, you know, I find myself procrastinating on documents that I need to write for work until, you know, they're due. So like I know like, oh, I have like a week to write a long document for work, but you know, I have a week, so I'll wait until like the last 2 days to write it or something like that. And I hate that about myself. Like I hate procrastinating. Another thing that I'm procrastinating on is my board game design. So like I feel like with my board game design, I'm stuck. And one of the reasons I'm stuck is because I'm a perfectionist and I just really struggle to work on something when I feel like what I'm doing right then and there is just not good enough. And that's been a problem my entire life as well. So this book addresses all the different reasons that you might be procrastinating on something. So it kind of talks about like why you're doing this. So, you know, there's sections for feeling stuck, overwhelmed, unmotivated, disorganized, discouraged, and then there's a tab for extras. So for example, if you go to, I believe I saw it in the table of contents, if there was a table of contents, I can't remember. Ah, yeah, there it is. So for example, it will break down what falls under each of those categories. So for stuck, for example, it breaks it down into difficulty getting started, indecisive, perfectionist, which is relevant to me, distracted. So then I turned to the section on perfectionist, which starts on page 73. And then it talks about like what it, you know, it gives you some strategies for combating your procrastination for this reason, which is perfectionism. So for example, here is a speed run kind of exercise that you can do, and it tells you what is it, who it works best for, what you'll need, how it works, why it helps, and it gives you tips. And it's going to give you multiple like strategies for fighting against different kinds of reasons that you are procrastinating. So another section that I went to was unmotivated, because I was feeling unmotivated for working on one of my papers for work. So you know, I feel like my salary should be motivation enough, right? And eventually it will kick in, like, you know, like before it's due and time is really running low, I'm going to be like, all right, I need to get this shit done because I want to stay employed, obviously. But, you know, I would really like it if I didn't wait until the last couple of days to work on something. So I turned to the section where I felt like, you know, it was relevant to that. And, you know, it gave some strategies for how to address that. So it seems like it's going to be a really helpful book. I think as long as you actually commit to doing the exercises in this book, it can be very useful. So if you are someone who suffers from severe procrastination like I do, I would recommend checking this out. Right now it's only available in the USA, but I did see that on the website the author is also selling PDFs that you can download if you can't get like a physical copy of the book. So if you are someone who procrastinates, maybe consider checking this out. I think it would be really helpful. So far I've only had it for like 2 days, but I've already found it to be helpful to me in the last 2 days that I've had it. So I just thought I would mention it. So I mean, credit goes to Board Game Therapist to putting it on my radar on Instagram. He made a whole post about it. So if you follow him on Instagram, you can see it. So I'm really happy I bought it, and I just wanted to talk about that briefly. So let's move on. So for Fiction Book Club, Sandra kind of left it up to me to pick the book, and I think, again, as always, it's just me and her. So I decided on Calabasas, a novel by R.F. Kuang. So if you can get your hands on Calabasas, that is what we will be reading. It's kind of like, I believe it's like a dark academic book. So it says Dante's Inferno meets Susanna Clarke's Piranesi, which I've actually read, which was kind of a really weird book. And this all new dark academia fantasy. It's in which two graduate students must put aside their rivalry and journey to hell to save their professor's soul, perhaps at the cost of their own. So really excited to read this. So if you're able to get this, I think for the first week, since our nonfiction book is pretty like intense and a lot, so I think that maybe we should just only read the first 2 chapters. So that would be from page 1 up until the end of page 38. So for next time, why don't we just read 2 chapters of Calabasas? So let me know once you've acquired this book. I hope you get it before next week, but even if you don't, you can just hold off until you finish those 2 chapters to watch that segment and then leave your thoughts afterwards. So let's read Calabasas. I hope I'll enjoy it. Let's see. I hope I don't halfway or towards the end decide I don't like it anymore, which I've done with a number of books, and then decide not to finish it. We shall see. So that's the book we're going to be reading for Fiction Book Club. So let's move on. So for Nonfiction Book Club, we've been reading Iran, A Modern History by Abbas Amanat, and for this week, we were supposed to read Chapter 9, which is Chaotic Democracy, Oil Nationalization, and Denied Hopes, 1941 to 1953, which takes us until the end of the coup when Mohammad Mossadegh is overthrown in a coup orchestrated by the US and the British. So I read the first half of this chapter more than a week ago, and it's kind of hard for me to remember exactly what it was about. But from the intro to this chapter, I can see that it was about, the Allied occupation of Iran and the effects of that occupation on Iran. I see that there was an atmosphere of distrust and conspiracy in Iran. And it's talking about the different groups and which ideologies they kind of tilt towards, like whether they tilt towards like Islam, whether they tilt towards communism, like the Tudeh party, or et cetera, right? So that's what kind of the intro kind of says. You see that there's going to be soaring inflation, scarce provisions, hoarding, and even starvation. So that was all happening during the Allied occupation of Iran, and so on. And then later it says after the war, Iran was praised as the bridge to victory in recognition of its strategic location and contribution to the war efforts, and memorial stamps were issued, blah, blah, blah. But it says that, only meager compensation was paid for the services and the hardware and by the former allies, but Americans duly paid their share. But the British procrastinated for years, and the Soviets ignored their share altogether. I mean, it's just like how other nations will use a nation because of its location or because it has oil or whatever, and then just, discard that nation after using it, which is what we're going to see, of course, happen more. So So I'm just going to kind of skip over all of that. It talks about the emergence of the Tudeh party, which is kind of like Iran's communist party. So you see, if you want to go over that, you can kind of see, how that party emerged. And then there's like a whole crisis, the Azerbaijan crisis. It says was the first clear contest between the Western Bloc and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So you can see I'm not gonna, because I don't remember too much about it, to be honest, of what I read, but I recall that it had some importance to do with everything. So anyway, so I just want to kind of skip ahead to Mossadegh and then what happened. So Mohammad Mossadegh, we see him come into power. So it says the failure of Reza Shah's government to improve the terms of the original DRC oil concession of 1901 had left a lasting scar. The 1933 concession extended for another 60 years, and the Anglo-Iranian oil companies full control over the huge oil fields of Khuzestan, as well as over production levels, distribution, pricing, bookkeeping, taxation, and ownership of installations and equipment of the Abadan refinery. So, and then it says the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which was owned by the British government, was not only a vital source for replenishing the post-war British economy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it says that the Iranian share of this Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was a meager royalty on the production of Iranian crude, and it amounted as late as 1951 to barely 16% of the total. And moreover, the Iranian share was subject to income taxes paid to the British Treasury, not only on the oil extracted from Iranian fields, but also on AIOC production in the whole region. Like, what utter bullshit, right? That's just infuriating. And then you learn about the discriminatory treatment towards Iranian technicians, engineers, and managers, and how they were treated, and it's horrific. So then there's like a little blurb about their living conditions and what it was like, and it is awful. So, here you have the British forcing these poor Iranians into working and in such horrible conditions, getting paid so little. So their wages were 50 cents a day. There was no vacation pay, no sick leave, no disability compensation. They lived in a shanty town without running water or electricity. In winter, the earth became flooded, and the mud in town was knee deep. In summer, they didn't have fans or anything like that. And their houses, which were basically cobbled together from rusted oil drums, turned into sweltering ovens. And there was nothing. There was no tea shop, not any baths, not a single tree. They didn't have anywhere to get shade. Just really bad. And if you've ever been in Iran in the summer months, which I have, let me tell you, it can get really, really hot. If this is a desert we're talking about, so during the day it's going to be really hot. I mean, I guess a good part about that is that it's mostly dry heat. So you're not dealing with humidity, which I absolutely cannot stand. But even the dry heat, when you're talking about over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, that's really bad, right? And if you don't have any shade, I remember, when I was in Iran, it was a long time ago. So we're talking many, many years ago now. But I can still remember how hot I would feel and how I would seek out shade to sit in because I was there in July, which is really hot. So just really terrible working conditions for the people who are working there. So then you see, basically the rise of Mossadegh, because he wants to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, and he wants to create a negative equilibrium, which the nationalists aim to cancel unfair privileges of both powers and to preserve Iran's precarious balance in an increasingly polarizing world. So, he's asking for demands for he wants demands for better terms and eventually for nationalization. And these demands coincided with the decolonization of the post-war era. and according to this was no doubt boosted by it. So, you learn about how during this time is when India is breaking away from control of the British, but is also being partitioned. And at the same time, you have the partition of mandatory Palestine and the emergence of the state of Israel despite Arab-Palestinian protests. So it says, partitions in Palestine and India were seen as British ploys to divide and prolong colonial rule in a new disguise, in the same way that AIOC was exploiting the fractured Iranian polity for its own benefits. So you learn more about, the conditions that have led to Iranians feeling, like the British are just kind of using them, which they are, and they want to nationalize the oil companies so that hopefully they can improve their own economy and so on. It says here it's fixed. So between 1941 and 1950, it's fixed royalties of 16%, a paltry 1/6 of the total AIOC income of £100 million was cancelled by near hyperinflation of the post-war years. So then we get into the whole thing about power scrambles and missed chances and, rigged elections and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But eventually what you learn is that Mossadegh comes into power. He becomes the premier, like the prime minister of Iran. And eventually he manages to oust the Shah, like by kind of gaining control of the military. So he wanted control of the military, and there was like kind of some discussion about whether the constitution actually gives that to the prime minister or whether it gives it to the Shah. But eventually he ended up gaining control of the military too. So basically, everyone says that Mossadegh is a democratically elected leader. And yes, you can see that he was democratically elected. But as you read this chapter, you will also see that he had some tendencies that leaned more towards authoritarianism, right? And people were kind of wary of him, like, oh, like here's a guy who really respected the Constitution and respected democracy, but now he's kind of doing these things which don't seem very democratic and don't seem like you're really respecting the Constitution. I mean, some might argue he was doing that, for the greater good of Iran and trying to keep Iran within this democracy, and then eventually when it gets settled, then, he could maybe go back towards more, towards an actual democracy and less authoritarianism. But you do see signs of that authoritarianism as well. And let's, be clear that the Shah also was an authoritarian ruler too. But it's really interesting that in Iran, like how many majlises, like I guess the equivalent of a majlis would be like a parliament, and how many of them like are convened and then dissolve, and then you get new members and then those dissolve and go away and so on and so forth. Like it just seems like this never ending, like, creation of a new majlis, and then it's, gone, and then a creation of another majlis and so on. So you learn about Mossadegh and, his aspirations. And of course, he, let's see, Mossadegh. So he was willing to align himself with the growing middle classes who shared his high aspirations. He was quick to learn the populist politics of the post-war era and quicker to grasp and indigenize its anti-imperialist message as it circulated throughout the non-Western milieu from China, India, and Southeast Asia to Africa and Latin America. So it says here, Mossadegh was an anomaly. He neither rose from the underprivileged classes or the bourgeois, nor did he entertain revolutionary views at the outset of his career. So he came into office to implement oil nationalization as his prime objective, an aspiration that, despite a popular mandate, was soon to face opposition from many quarters. From Britain, which was fundamentally against it, from the Tudeh, which still advocated a northern oil concession to the Soviet Union, and soon from the Shah and conservatives, and eventually from Mossadegh's own allies in the Majlis and the National Front. Let's see. Yeah, so he thought that if he could gain control of the Anglo-Iranian oil company, that, you know, they would be able to then combat poverty, disease, and backwardness among the people, that they would be able to eliminate corruption and intrigue, and that Iran would achieve its economic and political independence, right? But, you know, what is happening during this time, you know, so you see that this is during the post-war time, the Cold War era, and Britain really just wants, you know, its profits, and it just wants to make as much money as it can, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, eventually you see the US kind of shifting in its views on Iran and becoming more of, you know, they become a nation that decides, yeah, it's going to interfere and help the British overthrow Mossadegh. But there was something I wanted to point out about oil, which I remember reading somewhere in this chapter, and even Venezuela was mentioned, which I thought was really interesting and very relevant to today. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, I must have passed it somewhere. But there was an area where it talked about the different oil in the world at this time, and where it was coming from, and where the different, you know, countries were, you know, oh, here we go. I believe that this is it. Is this it? No, this is not it. Good. Where was Venezuela mentioned? I know I saw Venezuela mentioned somewhere in this chapter, because it mentioned the different oil sources, and it talked about the Venezuela having a certain amount of oil, and the US kind of having some kind of a deal there, and then it talked about Saudi Arabia and so on. I cannot find it now. I know I highlighted it, but it's kind of, there's just so much that I highlighted that I can't find it. Yeah. Anyway, so let's see, a revolution in the making, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I just wanted to find out where the kind of coup stuff starts to begin, and like why. Oh, one thing I thought that was interesting was when Mossadegh, so it says he like overthrew, or he got rid of, he dismissed without any set procedures close to 200 sitting judges, state attorneys, and higher ranking officials on charges of corruption and ineptitude, despite resistance from members of the Reform Commission. That's like, wow, that's a lot of people to dismiss. Yeah. He closed down the offices of the Shah's brothers and sisters, banished Princess Ashraf to Europe on charges of conspiracy, and after July 21st, 1952, tried to rein in the Shah by treating him strictly as a constitutional monarch. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So then the end game, that's when we start seeing the election of Dwight Eisenhower, and how that's a turning point, and how they're going to basically deal with Iran, and and how they want to bring the downfall of Mossadegh. And even during this time, you know, it seems like that there was negotiations. One thing that I was like outraged by was like the fact that the British tried taking this to, was it the Hague, if I remember correctly, like trying to argue that Iran was like, you know, going against, you know, international law. Like, dude, you are a freaking occupying power, and this oil does not belong to you. It is not on British soil. It's on Iranians. It's under Iranian soil. Like, it's not yours. It's not fucking yours. And the fact that a colonial power would have the audacity to file a court case to argue about a country wanting to nationalize this oil company for oil found in its own country, it's just insane. Like, I mean, this is what you're dealing with when you're dealing with colonial powers. Like, it's just insane how people can think that they can just go into a country and just take control of something that belongs to another people, and then offer them very little for it, and make them live in horrible conditions to, you know, get you that product that you want control of. Like, it's just so infuriating. Like, I just could not believe what I was reading about that. But yeah, but basically you see until a decision was going to be issued by the court on this, whether it had the jurisdiction or not to even preside over a case like this, you see that the British and Americans are kind of holding off on, you know, actually committing a coup. And Mossadegh himself, you know, was kind of waiting to find out what would happen with that as well. Yeah, so, yeah, and then we get to, you know, interesting. I also found interesting was about the Ayatollah Kashani and his role in everything in the government at this time. And it's really interesting that here's this Ayatollah, the Shia Ayatollah, who is kind of in favor of the Shah. But just very interesting, I thought, because that would definitely not be the case today, right? You're not going to see people who are in favor of Ayatollah Khamenei be in favor of reinstating a Shah or a monarchy. So it's just really interesting how different people aligned themselves for different reasons back then. I just thought that was interesting. Yeah, but anyway, so now we get to 1953 and a plan for a CIA-led covert operation to remove Mossadegh was finalized. Operation Ajax. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and of course you see that the Shah was involved in this. And he had to sign some documents agreeing to appoint Zahedi as prime minister. And it's interesting that their coup failed on the first attempt. So then they had to make a second attempt, which obviously did succeed. But it failed on the first attempt. And, you know, it's shocking that after there's, you know, an attempted coup, that Mossadegh would be naive enough to kind of like talk to this American guy and trust him. Like, clearly Mossadegh just didn't have, like, you know, he didn't have the mind of a politician. I feel like he couldn't understand how manipulative different people and countries and powers would be at that time. So I think Iranians definitely know better now, but Mossadegh at that time clearly did not. Yeah, so then we see when the actual coup happens and, you know, all the different groups that are paid to take part, like the angry crowd and blah, 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 wielding guns, and you've got like the bazaar people, you've got, yeah, it's just really interesting, like all the people who were kind of enlisted to help with this. So it says, the hired guns included the knife-wielding lutis of Tehran's poorer neighborhoods and Tehran's wholesale produce market. Their associated gangs centered in certain zurkhanes, which are like houses of strength, and allegedly prostitutes from the poverty-stricken red light district known as Sheher-e-No. And they were assigned with carrying the Shah's portrait and shouting pro-Pahlavi slogans. Very interesting. So yeah, so eventually they moved towards Mossadegh's house, and there were tanks and troops and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, then they were attacking his house, and the Shah and the coup happens. Yeah, just very interesting. One thing that I didn't see mentioned in this chapter, and I thought maybe it might be mentioned in the section of Mossadegh's legacy and myth, was the aftermath of the coup and how much the British actually ended up getting from the Shah. What their percentage was and what the percentage of Iran was, because, and I'll have to double check this, but what I learned in graduate school when I was studying this was that at the end, after the coup had, you know, was finished and the Shah was reinstated as the monarch of Iran, that he didn't want to lose support of the people. So actually all the negotiations that were happening at the time between Mossadegh and the British, Mossadegh was actually offering them more than what the Shah gave them in the end, because he didn't want to seem like a weak ruler to the Iranian people then at that time. So in the end, the coup was for nothing. In the end, you like overthrew this like democratically elected leader, reinstated an authoritarian Shah, and got less profits from the Anglo-Iranian oil company anyway. So this is what I learned in graduate school, but that was a long time ago and I need to double check my facts, but I believe that that was the case. And I didn't see that mentioned in the conclusion of this chapter, which is like Mossadegh's legacy and myth. So I didn't see that mentioned, but I'm going to double check on that. But in this section with Mossadegh's legacy and myth, Yeah, so, it talks about his disturbing display of autocratic conduct toward the end of his premiership may be seen as a conundrum, a vacillation between two modes of constitutional liberalism and radical populism, blah, blah, blah. It says here that Mossadegh and his colleagues paid homage to Islam as a source of Iranian identity and courted religious authorities while also hoping to preserve the ideals of a secular society, freedom of the press, and equality before the law, notions that were in contrast to the conservative outlook of the Shi'i establishment and its radical allies. Yeah, and it says here, the combination of an insecure monarch with memories of his father's downfall, a royal court susceptible to intrigue, a reinvigorated officer corps in search of power and privilege, an old elite clinging to its privileges, corrupt deputies in the volatile majlis, the comings and goings of impermanent governments, the presence of a well-organized and ideological Tudeh party, and extremist Islamic tendencies, all these made designing any workable consensus highly formidable, if not impossible. Like, this is Iran, and I feel like the chapters before we've read kind of also had all of that going on, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this chapter points out in here that it should be noted that AIOC and the British government never really offered any plausible deal to Mossadegh for a viable compromise, which is, unfortunate. Yeah. It says here the general public, hard hit by rising inflation and unemployment, was ready to leave behind a decade of political turmoil, demonstrations, and much disillusionment. Despite earlier support for the oil nationalization campaign, by August 1953, the climate of indifference was palpable. Yeah, and then, you see launched a second era of Pahlavi autocratic rule that by and large excluded the public from the political process. So that's what happens when the Shah is reinstated, and Iran's chances for a plural society were further diminished. Yeah. The Shah's authoritarian rule, evident shortly after the coup, further convinced his opponents of the United States' malicious designs to impose on Iran a dictator subservient to its strategic interests. So, this really set the stage for the Islamic Revolution, so I'm interested in seeing what's going to happen next. Yeah, so the next chapter is the White Revolution and its opponents, 1953 to 1963. So we still have a while before we get to the Islamic Revolution, apparently. But, I think it's a lot, but I feel like maybe we should try to be ambitious and just read the whole chapter. And I'm saying that because with current events in Iran right now, I feel like it's really important that we get to the Islamic Revolution, and so that we can understand what Iranians are dealing with and how they feel right now. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about current events in Iran during my rant of the week, if I don't run out of steam, that is. But the way things are in Iran right now, I just will briefly say that, the media always gives you one view, the mass media, of what's happening in Iran. Yes, there are, protests. Actually, I don't know if, it feels like a few days since I've really heard or seen anything about mass demonstrations in Iran. Like, I just feel like, it was really in the news and all over Instagram for like a few days. And then all of a sudden, like, it feels like nothing again. It's very bizarre. But you had these mass demonstrations, and then you had acknowledgement from Israel that it sent in agents to cause protests, to cause these demonstrations. And so then, you had a lockdown on, communication. So no internet, no phone calls. People cannot reach their families in Iran. People are being killed, but killed by who? So some people are saying that the people being killed are actually being killed by the Israeli agents who have been sent to Iran to cause this disturbance, so that, there's more support for intervention from the USA and Israel to free Iran. There's just all these different, groups that are saying different things. One thing that you could see is that there are people in Iran who, don't want that intervention. They don't want US and Israeli intervention for very obvious reasons. But the reason that the protest started was because of a really bad economy. And why does Iran have a really bad economy? Because of sanctions. And why does the US impose sanctions when it does on other countries? It's to force regime changes, right? We know that sanctions are imposed on nations to force those regime changes. So it all comes down to that. And I think it really comes down to the fact, if people really support Iranians and really want to see them have the kind of government that the people want, which may not be this Islamic government, but a democratic government in which people can practice whatever religion they want freely, choose whether or not to wear the headscarf and so on. Like, in order to get to that point, for Iranians to fight for the government that they want, you have to lift the sanctions and stop strangling the people. Like, if you're strangling the people and denying them a good living, which, they are basically denied because of these sanctions, you're not giving them the ability to actually protest and achieve the things that they want to achieve. Like, it's just not going to happen. So I feel like if the West actually truly cared about democracy in the Middle East, which we always know is a sham, and it's more about controlling the oil and the resources, but if they truly cared about democracy, they would lift the sanctions and they would give the Iranian people a chance to fight for what they actually want and not intervene and now install a new Shah who is a Zionist. Reza Pahlavi is a Zionist. We've seen him go to the wall in Israel posing with Netanyahu. We've seen him in photos with Netanyahu. His daughter is married to a Zionist. Like, he's a Zionist. And he's made a statement already that says once he becomes the monarch of Iran, he will immediately recognize the state of Israel. Like, sorry, but the Iranian people actually don't want that. You know who does want that? Iranians in the West whose families fled Iran a long time ago, and they have become really susceptible to Zionist propaganda. And you see so many of these Zionist Persians, like especially in California, like, when they're out demonstrating to show their support for Iran, they're also waving Israeli flags. Like, it's just absolute insanity. But not every Iranian feels that way, and thank God. Like, there are so many sensible Iranians that you can follow on social media who are anti-Zionist, and you will see clashes between these groups of Iranians on social media. And in fact, I was called a bitch by a Persian, another Iranian on Instagram recently, just for that very same reason, who I'd never interacted with before, an Iranian who is a board gamer. But I can talk more about that in my rant of the week. So maybe we should just try to read the next chapter in its entirety so that we can just get a move on and get to the Islamic Revolution. Let me know your thoughts, but the next chapter would be chapter 10, The White Revolution and Its Opponents, 1953 to 1963. It is very long, so I might just skim through it, to be honest, because it's like 100 pages. If you don't think we should read the whole thing, I don't even know if I'll be able to read the whole thing, but I'll attempt it. I'm going to attempt it and see how far I get. And you can attempt it too. And then, obviously in the next video, you'll find out whether I managed to do it or not. But I really just want to kind of like get through this book so we can get to the stuff that is more relevant to today. So anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I know that I always give kind of a crappy explanation or a summary of what happened, but just let me know your thoughts about the whole coup, about Mossadegh's rise to power, what he did while he was in power, any parallels to what you see today. Just let me know in the comments below your thoughts. So let's move on. So I just recorded a very long rant of the week, but I feel like I'm not going to put it in this video, and I want to try to next week because I'm just too tired now. But next week, I think I want to try to address everything again in a more cohesive manner. So basically, the rant of the week was in response to a comment that Alex from Board Game Co. posted on my last week's weekly playback. And I don't think he posted that comment in good faith. So I will say briefly that I really do not think that that comment was made in good faith. We've never had a discussion about the genocide or the terrorist the terrorism that Israel commits against Palestinians, the war crimes that it commits. We've never had a discussion about this. Alex acts like he's posting this for my benefit, that, the way in which I approach things is not good. I've called out a person of every religion, of every color, of every gender in this industry, and blah, blah, blah. He makes a lot of claims, number one, which are not true. And again, I don't think he's saying any of this in good faith. Like, Alex genuinely does not care about my reputation in this industry. And if I've damaged my reputation, which he seems to think I have, so why do you care? Like, you've never cared. You would not want me as a Zionist to be more, to present things in such a way that actually would get people to finally acknowledge in this industry en masse that yes, there's a genocide happening, and yes, Zionists should be boycotted. That is not Alex's end goal. So what was the point of posting that comment, which is just filled with so much crap? Like, I didn't address all of the points that he made in his comment in my response to him, in response to his comment on the actual comment itself on my YouTube page on that video. But there's a lot I do want to respond to, because a lot of it is incorrect, and a lot of it is just him avoiding the fact that he is in fact a Zionist, and that I'm calling out Zionists in this industry because Zionism is the root cause of the genocide of the Palestinians. And I'm not calling anyone out in order to get them to make me happy. Like, that has never been the purpose. Like, I wrote a whole statement about this, and I posted it on my stories on Instagram, and I posted it on Twitter and Blue Sky. So I'm just going to post that statement here, because the goal is not to get people to make me happy. And you should not be doing anything based on what other people say. You should be doing something because you know it's the right thing to do. Condemning a genocide is the right thing to do. Boycotting Zionists is the right thing to do if you claim to be pro-Palestinian, because Zionism is the root cause of the genocide. It is the root cause of all Palestinians suffering for over 75 years. You cannot claim to be pro-Palestinian while supporting Zionists, and Alex is a Zionist. So in next week's video, I want to go through all the points that he made in his response to what happened on October 7th in a video over 2 years ago. So I watched that video recently, and I took screenshots of it, and I want to, in a more cohesive fashion, address those things that he said back in that video, and address the stuff that he said in this comment, which is just bullshit. And also another comment that he made, that he leans towards Zionism. You either are a Zionist or you're not. Like, you can't lean towards an ideology like Zionism. That's like saying, oh, I lean towards Nazism. That's like saying I lean towards white supremacy, but I'm not fully a white supremacist. Like, who says that? No one says that. It makes no fucking sense. You either are a Zionist or you're not. And Alex is a Zionist. Like, it's pretty fucking clear he's a Zionist, because all the things he said in his response to October 7th were Zionist talking points. And he stated a lot of things in that video that were untrue, and he never issued corrections. But my rant of the week that I had just finished recording is so long, and I just ramble on, and I feel like it's not cohesive. Like, I've never claimed to be some amazing orator, right? Like, this is not my profession. My profession is not public speaking. I'm mostly in my profession write, and I'm much better at writing than I am speaking, honestly. So I want to prepare for next week's rant of the week, where I actually take notes and present everything in a much more cohesive fashion, so that you all can really follow along and understand, in fact, why Alex is a Zionist, and if you are a pro-Palestinian, why you should be boycotting Zionists in the industry. I think the reason that Alex finally posted a comment of some kind to me regarding me calling him out and calling out other people in the industry is because he doesn't like the fact that I'm calling for a boycott of Level Up Retreat, which he is an organizer of, because that's going to put money in his pockets, and he is a Zionist. And you should not be putting money in the pockets of Zionists. And I'm not the only person in this industry who calls for boycotts. People are calling for the boycott currently of Upper Deck for using the Harry Potter IP, which is then apparently, I think, going to be putting money into J.K. Rowling's pockets. And J.K. Rowling is strongly anti-trans and contributes to anti-trans legislation. So if you are someone who cares about trans rights, you should be boycotting J.K. Rowling. Obviously, because you don't want to put more money into her pockets for her to then harm trans people. Likewise, if you claim to be pro-Palestinian, you should not be putting money into the pockets of Zionists who then support the state of Israel and cause more harm to Palestinians. Like, that's just basic common sense, right? And people do call for boycotts in this industry. I'm not the only one. I'm the only one who's calling for the boycott of Zionists, though. So that's the only fucking difference. And maybe that's what finally got under Alex's skin, causing him to leave this comment, which is so clearly not in good faith. Like, Alex really, truly could not care less about my reputation in this industry and whether people think I'm just this crazy person who rants week after week or whatever. He couldn't care less. He couldn't care less about how I'm getting my message across and wanting me to get my message across to people. He could not care less about that. In fact, as a Zionist, he would want me to not get my message across to people. So he would not be giving me advice in good faith saying, oh, Sarah, if you did this in this way, maybe more people would listen to you. No, none of that was in good faith, and that's very clear. But I'm going to address his comment next week, including, like, he mentioned several people, and he's like, oh, you've called them out, you've called people out of every race, and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. Hello, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, because I don't discriminate. Like, I don't favor certain people over others. If you are a shill, if you are a hypocrite, if you show clear double standards, if you show that you know, any of those things, I'm going to call you out. If you've built your platform on diversity, but then you've never once said anything about the genocide, like Eric Lang, for example, I'm going to call you out for that. If you have a watermelon emoji in your Instagram bio, but then you have openly shown support for Zionists, like Board and Shield has, I'm going to call you out for that. But I will talk about all of this in more detail in next week's video, and I will also I'll talk about it in more detail in next week's video and provide hopefully a more, coherent, like, argument that people can follow along with. Is there anything else of his that I want to address right now? I guess I don't. I mean, like I said, he said a lot of stuff, which I think is just bullshit, but we can talk about it next week. But yeah, for right now, I'll just say, boycott Zionists because they should be fucking boycotted. And if you actually care about the people of Iran, which Eric Lang supposedly does, because he's now posted a tweet on Blue Sky asking for Iranians in the industry who he can support so he can make a starter pack of them, though he, as far as I know, never did that for Palestinians. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he's never done that for Palestinians. But now all of a sudden he cares about Iran and Iranians. If you truly care about Iranians, you should not want to see a Zionist Shah installed as the new monarch of Iran. You should not want a monarchy. You should want a full-on democracy chosen by the Iranian people. And in order for that to happen, you should be calling for the sanctions to be lifted. That's what you should be advocating for. If you truly care for the Iranian people, you should have been and should be advocating for the sanctions to be lifted. Sanctions are always imposed on a country to force a regime change. And Israel has made it very clear what their intentions are in order to get a regime change in Iran. They've admitted to sending their own agents into Iran. We know why Israel and the US want for there to be a regime change in Iran. Should there be a regime change? That's up to the Iranian people, but that needs to happen organically, and that can happen organically once living conditions are better for them. So so if you actually care about Iranian people, you should be advocating for sanctions to be lifted. But again, I'll talk about all of that in next week's video too. You can read the comment that Alex made on the video last week on last week's video. And again, not in good faith, and I have a lot to say about it, but I'm going to try to present it in a much better way next week. So you don't listen to me for over an hour, because like literally that segment was over an hour long of me just rambling, and I'm going to take notes on his video that he made and actually pull out quotes, which I think will be better, which basically show how he is in fact a Zionist with all of his Zionist talking points. Okay, so I'll do that next week. Thanks. This week's question of the week is inspired by Cozy Stickerville. What are some of your favorite Legacy games? Please leave the names in the comments below. Do you play Legacy games? Why or why not? And what are some Legacy games you would recommend to people who maybe would, you know, not lean towards Legacy games? Are there some lighter ones? Are there other cozy ones that you know about? If you do, please leave their names in the comments below. And until next time, bye!